we want to start understanding React. Okay, now to understand React, we need to start off with just a little bit of a refresher on the request response cycle. The way that the request response cycle works is actually pretty straightforward if we try not to complicate it. Because there's always these what ifs and, I'm certain I've heard about this. And yes, there are tons of ways of doing it. But what it boils down to is something that's not extremely complicated. All right. And so that's what we need to keep in mind as we're going along here is we're not trying to make it complicated. We have a client. They're looking at their screen. They've got their keyboard here. They say, hey, I want to go and hit that website. And so they put in a request, and that request has a URL, okay? A web address. And that web address knows that it's over on this server, okay? And this server is going to look at that URL and it's going to say, yeah, I know about that, or no, I don't. Okay, if we mistype an address, we get a response back that would be a 404 response, right? Nobody likes those, but it's just going to happen because you won't always have the right address. But we don't care about 404s right now. What we want is we want to know the server can give us what we need. Now, React is a special animal because React, what we do is we are writing our HTML, our JavaScript kind of all in one place. We can even do style at the same time. And so it gets all put together on the server. Now, we have to remember that clients only understand 3 languages: HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. What we're writing is a variation on JavaScript. Now, luckily, we have tools that are working in the background, and they're going to put it all together for us. But the thing that makes React so fast is the fact that kind of in a sense, our React project is crammed into a single package, and our single page application, or SPA, as people refer to it, is going to give them a single package. One file condensed. It gets to the destination and expands. Okay? So when I look at a web page, it's going to show me all the files that are included in this web page. Well, a React server is going to give you everything pretty much all at once. And as a result, when we start changing views and all the data is included in this package, when I change my page, it just stays right at my computer. It's blazing fast in that respect. And as a result, our clients look at it and go, dude, this is responsive. This is nice. I like using this. And the other part is, instead of having to go back and forth as it's asking things left and right, it's going to go ahead. It doesn't have to do this continual back and forth, because all it's going to do is say, oh, in my React stuff, it told me I needed to go to the Node server to get the data. And this data isn't like full-blown web pages with HTML and everything else. It's just going to run over here and say, hey, can I get the data? And it says, yeah, here's your JSON, your JavaScript object as a response. And React that's running on the client is going to say, yeah, I know how to display that. I already do. You don't have to worry about sending me some more CSS files, more HTML files, where a lot of other architectures require that. This is the reason that a JavaScript stack is really, really fast and powerful. And it takes a lot of work out of our servers. Our React server kind of says, here's your package, go for it, and then doesn't have to worry about talking to them every time they change pages. Now, there's certain pieces of information that'll go back and forth, but for the most part, your React server is just going to say, here you go, run with it. And so you look at Facebook and you can see that it can display things, but it's all repeated stuff. It takes this post and it just repeats it time after time. And so as a result, we can see why that type of technology, if I can make the HTML, CSS, all those repeatable pieces, doesn't have to be huge. The data is the only thing that needs to change, and the data is typically not huge. I mean, you've got a picture, but the text, it doesn't have to be formatted. We've gotten rid of a lot of the extras. And so as a result, this is what we're trying to accomplish. Because in a standard HTML, CSS, JavaScript website, every time you change pages, you got to go back to that server. You got to say, hey, now I want to go to this page. And he goes, yep, there you go. There's the new files. And so it's one of those where you want to see what type of things you're serving out of your web server, because sometimes a React server is overkill. It would be cheaper as far as like the bandwidth and the CPU, it may be cheaper to just go static HTML, CSS files. Just depends on what you're showing. But in most cases, we've found that React is a great solution. All right. So anyone have questions about the request response cycle?
I think I understand this pretty clearly, but one of the core benefits of React is strictly from a user experience, where if you were to say be on a form that is kind of pretty lengthy and you scroll down and you find a post that you like, you click the like button and then it just will auto update, and then the user remains in the same spot, but not like jettisoned to the top of the page, correct?
That's right. I mean, there's lots of pieces to it. React it never actually leaves the very first page it hits. It just replaces pieces of the DOM in memory lightning fast. And that ability to stay right where you're at and go back and forth and stuff, it's all kind of smoke and mirrors, but it's kind of built into that React library that makes life just that much easier for you. And so, but there are certain caveats. Trust me, if it was all wonderful, people would just all use React, right? So there's pros and cons to everything, and it's important to just kind of recognize we're gonna focus on what makes React awesome. So, is there another question?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
I do an awful lot of SEO work, search engine optimization.
Mhm.
And so how does React work with SEO?
That is a great question, and it's actually a very in-depth answer.
Okay, well,
Basically, what they've had to do is they've had to add in certain libraries into the server to respond back, for lack of a better word, it sends back more HTML and CSS and stuff in kind of a static way.
right.
And that's oversimplified, but what they've had to do is they've had to make it so that the server could respond to each unique URL request, because typically those bots come out and they scan a page and they see links and they follow the link, and they scan a page and they follow a link. And so our servers have to be able to respond to every single one of those requests. And typically it's only bots that are requesting those individual pages when it's included in the actual single page application bundle that's sent out. So yeah. It's kind of a smoke and mirrors magic trick that happens on React servers for SEO.
I would think it's a bit of a sticky wicket too, that it's difficult to actually get it to work, to allow a bot, a search, Google search engine to scrape a page for content. If the content is all dynamic, that's going to be tough.
It is. And so it's one of those, like I said, it's a more in-depth answer than I can give you right now. But I mean, there are ways of doing it in setting up your server in order to respond properly so that you can get SEO results.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So search engine optimization is a fun one for people. You know, you'll find a lot of company heads that are like, hey, we want to, you know, we want to make sure we're at the top of the results. And it's like, well, how much money do you have? Because a lot of it boils down to that. So,
Yep.
all right. So the nice thing is that, you know, our stuff is we're going to create these reusable components, kind of like Facebook, where you see a repeating style and element over and over. They write it with React. So here's our chance, right? Okay, so question in the chat about how does a React app and a Django Python app differ? So the way that it works is Django and Python, they combine the back end and the front end into a single package, if you will. You've got a request that comes into the server. That request then gets satisfied by going and grabbing things out of the database, and then it applies that to a template called a view. Okay, and that view is HTML with like little placeholders for data, and the data gets shoved into those little placeholders, and then that response goes back. But every page that you go to, it has to do that exact same thing, right? And even if there is no data from the database, it still has to come back to the server. The Python Django server receives the request, it grabs the template, which is just HTML, possibly, and sends it back as a response. And so there's a lot more work on the server, whereas React, it's kind of like, hey, the front end handles all that. I don't have to worry about views. I don't have to worry about anything like that because I sent it to you all in the beginning. And the components are going to lay it out for you. The only thing that you might need is the data. And in order to do that, you go and talk to the Node and Express server. So that's the key differences between the Django Python apps and React. They handle the front end very, very differently. A lot less traffic required at your servers in a React app. All right, so now as we look at things on websites, you'll actually find that there's many repeating things, right? So if we were to look at, say, the Coding Dojo, right, the student dashboard, you can see here things that are repeating. If I were to do this in CSS, I would probably start to look at, okay, this is going to be one big div right here, right? And inside of that div, I could have a whole bunch of these small little sets that includes both an image and the text, and they're all going to follow the same pattern of how they do it, right? A repeating concept. You come over to the tracks and you have a repeating concept that's a little bit bigger, right? It includes inside of itself like a header. And we have a whole bunch of these small track module icons with their text that can be repeated as well. So when I'm looking at this from a CSS standpoint, right, I could use classes. And I could say, okay, over in this div, all of my different stacks can have a specific class applied. And if you guys look at your dashboard, you're going to find that they aren't all grayed out icons. I could apply a different class or a different image to that piece, that block, no problems. And over here, the text is exactly the same. So if I'm applying that text to an icon, I could use a class, and I can use a class for this header, right? And so CSS, we've already kind of trained our brains to break things down into blocks and start working with those blocks. The beauty is you've been training for React. Everything gets broken down into blocks. The difference is we call them components. And that component, once I've created it, just like in our classes and we create a new instance of a class, well, we just create a new instance of a component in React, and all of a sudden I can repeat all this stuff over and over as many times as I want. And each one, just like a class, is going to hold its own personalized pieces of information. And inside of a larger group, I can have a whole bunch of small pieces that are children. Okay, we've been doing this all along. Divs have p tags inside of them, right? Or divs have more divs inside of them. There's a parent-child relationship in the DOM, and React is taking advantage of it, right? So when I look at any website, I'm excited to say, well, I'm going to break this out pretty much the same as I do with my, I'm going to break this out the same as I would with my CSS. Now, I can break it into further things. I can say, well, this is for viewing pieces, and this is for actually doing work with pieces in React. But for right now, let's just look at it as breaking things into blocks that are usable, all right? And so when I look at the code, there are lots of ways of doing this, okay? Now, if you guys remember, there was the jQuery stuff, right? And jQuery, we had to bring in some files, and with those files, I was supposed to make sure that I found that I downloaded the files, and then, oh, geez Louise, that did not work. Now I got to figure out what just happened. My screen just went completely berserk. That wasn't cool.
Try command minus maybe.
On a Windows box, it would be control minus, and somehow I have zoomed my screen in so much. This is kind of ridiculous. Wow, I wasn't expecting that. But I have completely zoomed in some ridiculous fashion. Holy cow.
Could
Okay,
it be the middle scroll wheel? I've had that happen before, like try control middle scroll wheel.
Yeah, I'm trying that one. Okay, so this is really my screen magnifier apparently.
Yeah.
Okay, there we go. I don't know how I just turned that on, but I never want to do it again. I'm going to find a way to make sure I disable it. Wow, welcome to Windows. I hope you all enjoyed the ride. So, whew. All right, so jQuery. jQuery, we download the jQuery files using script tags. And then inside of there, I can go ahead with my scripts, and I can use my selection operators, and I can select the different DOM elements that I want and how I want them to do things and everything else, right? Well, I can do the same with React. All right. And so I'm going to just copy this in. But what we've got is we can use script tags just like we do with our jQuery. Okay. And what we have is we have two different files that we're going to download. One is our first, it's the React package. Okay. And then the other one is the React DOM package. And so these two packages are going to work together in order to provide me all of the React syntax and capabilities of the React library. So very similar to jQuery, we just downloaded the files and started using the functionality. And so it's not anything that's really, fancy or scary. Inside of my script tags, though, I'm going to have to do things in a React way. And the way that I start is I'm going to create an element. Okay, and I'm going to call this element app. And it's just kind of a common naming convention that we use a little bit later. But I'm going to use the imported React library, and I'm going to say create element. This is kind of similar to our jQuery stuff. And I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to create an H1 element. And that element, I could add in all sorts of things. You can see here that I've got stuff all over the place, and I can choose any one of these things. But you'll notice it's extending one of these existing elements. Okay, there is a class related with every element that you can create in React. And it simulates the stuff that we see inside of regular HTML. But it has JavaScript properties. And so we can create the things that we want. And you'll see here that options, element creation options, right? I could add in some different options that would be related to like some of the attributes that you would have in an H1 tag or whatever. But I'm just going to give it an empty object for right now for simplicity. And then I give it the text that sits in between the opening and closing tags. And so we can say, hello, this is a React element. All right. That's pretty straightforward. Now that I've done that, I've created this app object, this element. I now have to render it. And I use React DOM to render the app object that I created. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to reference the document, because we have to use the DOM, document.get element by ID. And you'll see on line 9, I have a div with an ID of root. Now, these are kind of common naming conventions that are used inside of React. App is always that first element that everything comes off of in our single page applications. And root is the div that we always refer to. So what's going to happen is all of our elements that get created in React get rendered inside of a single div that's commonly known as root. So this is basically a full-blown React app in regular HTML. Okay, now just so that you guys can see real quick, let's see here. Come over here. This is my HTML file, React in HTML. And you can see here, welcome to React. This is the div root. I got really creative, can you tell? So, all right. And so here, what I'm going to do is I can paste those in just a second. Here you can see, here's my h1 tag. I've got my div, and I haven't saved. That's what this little dot up here in my file name is. That little dot allows you to know that you haven't saved it. And since I'm using a little app or extension that's in my VS Code editor, if I don't save it, it doesn't refresh the page. But as soon as I save it, it's going to automatically refresh that web page for me. And so, well, it should anyway. Did I? Let's see here. Get element by ID. Root. I know I'm probably missing something silly. Okay. Does anybody see what I'm missing here? Because this is about as simple as they get. I can't be missing this here.
No worries, take your time. Nothing
is
goes
so
in under
strange.
cross origin, right? Nothing goes in under cross origin.
Not that I'm aware of. I've never put anything in there before, but let's just see. Okay. So, well, here's a good chance for us to kind of look at things and just see what we've got going on. Now up here, you'll notice in my tools, in my web page and my React tools, I've actually got a React Developer Tools extension that I've installed. And so that is one that, you know, I can use. And if I just go into my developer tools, like we've done to view different things before, right? I have a thing called components, and I can see everything in there, and I can go look at my elements, and I can make sure that everything is in place here. So and I'm just going to look at my sources real quick. That's my React Developer Tools. Here's my React DOM. So that's looking right. My React code, because I mean, you can see these JS files. These are free for you to look at, and they go out and grab everything. And if you really want to challenge your code reading abilities, there you go.
There's two JavaScript errors there in the upper right-hand corner. So if you go to console.
It's a great point. So React DOM is not defined. Okay. So, okay, I understand the fave icon is something that you'll see in your own stuff, so don't worry about it. So the React. Okay, so where am I?
See if those URLs are still good.
That's a great point. Let's just go ahead and see. Let's go open that guy up.
That looks fine.
Well, let's just see here, because I think that the URL actually changed. Well, let's just find out. Well, it's got a newer version. Maybe that's it. So let's see. Okay, React DOM is still not defined, which is,
For cross origin, I would remove the equals and quotes and just leave cross origin by itself. See if that takes care of it.
well, let's go ahead and look. I'm willing to try just about anything. I mean, the funny thing is I just got done using this last month, so just fair warning, these things can change on you. Okay.
Yeah.
So
Well, the first rule with the demo is something will always go wrong.
absolutely, absolutely. I'm a firm believer in that. Okay. So what I'm betting here is I'm wondering if I got myself the import. Okay. Give me just one quick second. I'm gonna figure this one out because this is the type of thing that just bugs me to no end. Okay. So you get your element and you get your container, but React DOM, that should be right. I'm currently, just so that you guys can see what I'm doing, right? So I went ahead and I'm doing a little Google foo, right? So if you've got these script tags, right, APIs are available for the React DOM. So you can, if you're using ES6, which is more where we're headed, then you can use these functions and render here, React render, element and your container, and then these square brackets indicate that that's optional. If you want to, you could send in a callback function to run after the render is complete. And so, let's see here.
DOM is all capitalized, so it's capital React and then capital DOM. Is that
That
the
is
problem?
correct. Well, I wish it was. Oh, you are right. There we go. That is ridiculous and a little bit embarrassing. Let's just see how that works. There you go.
Yeah.
You got it. Nice. Thank you.
Woohoo.
Boy, I tell you, some days I'm needing to make a note on that one. Oh boy. All righty.
Case sensitivity. So a lot of Windows developers, if they just stick in Windows, they'll find that that case sensitivity doesn't seem to matter on a lot of things, right?
Oh
But
yeah.
those of us who work in JavaScript and those of us who work on, Java, case sensitivity is a huge deal.
Oh yeah. That's exactly right. And so you can tell that I don't use this method of coding other than for this demo. I probably typoed something as I fixed it in my code after last week or last month and didn't pick up on that one. Thank you.
Did your addition to the React DOM 16.14.0, is that also a change that needs to remain, or is it okay if it's back to whatever it was originally?
So I think it was just React 16, and I'm pretty confident that that's gonna be fine for it as well. So here we can just go back and refresh. Yep. And if you look, I don't know if it shows very well on Zoom, but you can see the lowercase letters at first, and then it changes it to the React element.
Just for a split second, yes.
So just for a split second, hopefully that's viewable by you guys. So as a result, it's loading in the HTML and then it applies the React JSX after it's downloaded the appropriate files. Now, you can imagine I'm not using that very often because it's just not the way to go. You can add React to legacy apps, and that's the reason we show it. If your company is moving over to React, you can modify individual pieces by having it download those React files, and then you can write it in a React way, but you're still having to go back and forth to the server a lot for those things. The advantage is once you have those React files downloaded, well, you don't really need to re-download them because they're in cache. So you're just having to go back and forth for the individual pages until you get the entire setup moved over to React, and then you can start singing and dancing and saying, our lives will now be easier. So I'm getting rid of this. Let's go ahead and look at this actually. This is just a simple, you guys did this in Web Fundamentals, playing with blocks and making them look pretty in a format similar to what we saw in our dashboard. So in this case, we want to be able to break this out into individual blocks, and this will be a block. We'll create this block here because it's a repeating element, and then we'll allow for these blocks to show up as well. Pretty straightforward, I think. Let's go ahead and see how we do this in the JavaScript React world. Okay, and so what we'll do is we'll clear that guy off, and I'm going to go into my console. The console here, I'm going to use a package, basically a software that kind of allows for a template. It knows how to build things, okay? And what that's referred to as is a, in JSX, it's drawing a blank now. It's used for packages. It's a package runner. That's what it is. So the package runner is called npx. Now you may have seen npm to install things. That's the Node Package Manager. This is the package runner, and it can use a thing called Create React App. Now, Create React App is just a package that is like, we know all the pieces to make an entire React server. Everything you need can be included in this one thing. And all I have to do is say npx create React app, and we can call this our first app. The name that I put here is going to be the name of the folder that gets created, and it's also going to be referenced in different places in the project. So whenever you do this, just plan on it taking a minute to download this and do this. I only do this once for the demonstration of it, and then I try to move forward with having these things pre-set up before our lectures, because this takes a couple of minutes to download. What it's doing is it's going out and it's grabbing a ton of JavaScript libraries and packages, as they're called, in order to support everything that we're going to want to do. Now, this includes a lot of things that we won't ever actually utilize, but it's there for the taking if we want it. And as you guys get into other things, as you're getting into your projects and stuff, wanting to know what is the next thing that I can do? How can I make this whiz bang, take full advantage of React? That's going to come from learning about others that are built in and some that you can get to. One of the things that you can do is you can go to npmjs.com. npmjs is the Node Package Manager registry. Here I can go ahead and search for things like React, And if I search for React, it's going to show me all sorts of things where people have created stuff. And it's free for me to add into my project. All I have to do is go and look at it and start using it. If you look at things like React Redux, well, let's click on it and see. Well, it looks like there have been 3.75 million downloads this week. I have a sneaky suspicion this is popular. Okay, this is one that is very, very well known, and there are companies out there that use this. We won't get into Redux in this course, but I will tell you as we start talking about things, I may reference it just so that you can get in and get a flavor for it, right? And if I look at this, I can do a whole bunch of research. And if I want to, I can even go over to the GitHub repository. And the GitHub repository for this allows me to actually get in and see everything that they're doing. And it shows me how to use it, how to go in and see the documentation. They'll give you different examples and stuff. You can see how to test it. I mean, this is great. It's all free for you, right? And so as a result, when I go to npmjs.com, I can see all these different packages. Now, when I get into my Create React app, you can still see we're still chugging right along, downloading files from npmjs.com. These are all free things that got created by really smart people that got tired and lazy. They decided they didn't want to do it the vanilla JavaScript way. They wanted to do it faster and better and easier for themselves. And so they created this whiz-bang utility, and then they put it out there for the world to see because programmers like to show how smart they really are. So as a result, you get to take advantage of all those smart people that put out their stuff there for free, and it makes your life that much easier. As you look at things, as we start putting them together, you're going to be like, oh my goodness, why did they have us learn all that painful vanilla JavaScript? There's meaning to the madness because in all actuality, everything behind the scenes here that makes it look so easy for you was written at some point, at some level, the hard way. And if you want to make the next whiz-bang utility, you may have to get into the nuts and the bolts. If something's not working the way you want it, well, you can still tweak it. I wouldn't suggest it for this course, but it's fun to play with to see how they did it and how to use it. All right, so now I'm done, finally. Oh, takes forever. The thing you're looking for is success. Created first app at, and it gives you the direction inside of your own computer. It also tells me that npm start will start the development server. It'll actually start my web server for me and start putting things out. And then I can run these, run build, test, run eject, things that we won't really use in our setups, but they're valuable in bigger projects. We suggest that you begin by typing cd first app, just so that you know if you try to run this and you aren't inside your app folder, you can guess what happens. And then you start it up with npm start. The other thing I wanted to just show you here is all these things that say warn, that are scary because they have the warning. Don't worry about it. The thing is it's totally normal. Some of these things are just saying, hey, you don't need this on your computer, so we didn't put it in there. It was optional. Or, hey, if you want to, you can contribute money to the free developing here of this stuff. So don't worry, there's plenty of things that you're going to run into as you're going through this stuff. Don't worry about it. Just look for this ending piece, success. Okay, it worked. Now I can cd into my first app, and I can type npm start, my node starting this. You know how we said node space and then the name of your file to start up a JavaScript file? Well, that's in essence what is happening here. We just happen to have a very fancy automation in the background that's going to create a working web server for us just by running that create React app. And so we wait for a minute, and here is what they created for us. All those files, all those folders, all those libraries, and they give me a spinning symbol with a little bit of text. That's pretty awesome, isn't it? You're just sitting there going, wow. Well, let's see if we can make this do what we want instead. But just for grins and giggles, I wanted to just show you this. So let's get into our developer tools. And in here, I can click on my components section, which is a part of my React app. And you'll notice that this will light up, this little icon will light up on any web page that has React. So as you're looking around the web and you're doing your surfing and go to buy something on, you know, Uncle Bob's widget store, and this thing's lit up, you can come in and you can look at their components and you can see this app. And it has this thing called props, which are properties. I bet we'll learn about those and stuff. So it's like there is an app component. And that app component, when I go over the top of this, it highlights the app itself. So when I have multiple blocks, multiple components all over the place, I can hover over it and it'll highlight it just like in my inspect elements and stuff. So they are ready for us to start using React.
Hi, Kevin. Can I
Yep.
ask a question?
Uh-huh.
So I joined few minutes late, I think 15 minutes late.
Uh-huh.
Just trying to understand what are we doing here?
So right now what we're doing is we are looking at our very first React app.
And
Okay.
the files which you have installed. So first, basically, you created a folder which is called first app. And inside that first app, you just downloaded bunch of files, right?
Well, I actually ran this command right here,
Right. So
and that
before,
automated it. Mhm.
right. So just before that, I was there actually. I joined at 5:15. But what I'm trying to understand is, so you just have a folder which is first app, and you went into that folder, and then you basically did npm, npx, and then you installed all of these, right?
Well, actually, the creation of that folder
Mm-hmm.
was done by putting that first app as the last parameter here in my command line. So I can change this first app to whatever name I want, and it'll work that way. So, yep. So it creates the folder and puts all the files into it for me for a full functioning React app. Yep.
So basically, you are running this command anywhere, and then you get an app and a server running.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, got it.
That's right. And so, you know, once it's done, I'm able to do an npm start, and that npm start will start my first app in the browser using either one of these URLs. It's the exact same as far as your computer's concerned.
Got it.
And now it's running.
Sure.
And so, yeah, now there's a few files that work together in order to make this package, okay? We all know that there's going to be an index.html file wherever we're at, right? We have to have one. And that one you'll see inside of this public folder, it really doesn't do a whole lot of anything. It brings in a few things. It has a manifest file and stuff that's there to help make things look better and work better on mobile devices. We've got a title for our page. We've got a body. And inside of that body, we've got one script tag that says, hey, you got to use JavaScript. Well, React kind of doesn't work without JavaScript. So, yep, that makes sense. And then just like in our example HTML, we have a div ID called root. That div ID root is going to be populated with everything that we could ever want in our single page application. That's why it's called a SPA, is because there's only one HTML file in the entire thing, and we typically don't touch it. Pretty easy. Then we have, in our source folder, we have got an index.js. Now, index.js is kind of like he's the glue that makes everything connect. HTML and React all kind of work together. And these import statements are the same as using those script tags that were to download from the source. And we have React DOM. We have an index.css, which happens to be right here. And then we have a app, which is where we're going to do almost everything. That's our starting point for everything React related. We have this report web vitals, which is free stuff that comes in with the Create React app. We won't jump into it. And then we have our React DOM render, which we had to put into the HTML. And by the way, I don't type this very often because it's there for me. So React with a capital DOM, and then we have a single element, which is a React.strict mode element, and it has an app. These are looking like HTML tags. They are React elements. And the way that you can tell the difference is because these ones start with a capital letter, and anything that's not capitalized when it comes to inside of tag or element brackets, it assumes are straight HTML. If it's capitalized, it assumes it's a React JSX element. All right. And so here we have our element that we're going to put inside of the root ID, and we have our selector. So in all actuality, index.html and index.js we don't really use, but it's kind of nice to know how things are fitting together. App.js, this is where we start. That was the spinning logo and our little edit source app.js and save to reload. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do some standard cleanup. The first thing we want to do is we don't need this logo anymore. So it's gone. I want to keep this very first div element. The only requirement for a component inside of React is that you have to return only a single element. Now you can have things stuffed inside of that element. So it's kind of like your container div, right? Everything fits inside this one div when you're doing like a bunch of CSS stuff. That's exactly what we're doing here. We're taking our div and saying, okay, we want that div to be the parent of everything. And I'm just going to go ahead and do an H1 here. Hello from React. All right. And if I go back to my page, the spinning thing's gone and hello from React is here, and you can still see the component. I have an app component, and it's just this one single segment. All right. So, yeah.
Quick question. This has to do with the file structure. What happens if you wanted like a header and footer? And then how would you, where would that go? Would that go in the source or public? Would you make subfolders? And then how would you, if you're making those, and how would that layout work? Or not layout, but.
Well, this is the way I would do it. I would create a header component, and then I would create a footer component. Oops, if I can spell correctly. and then I could have my custom things in between.
Okay, and then how would you, would that then apply to every web page that you would make for every other page that's underneath this site?
That's exactly right. So we'll get into routing here in a little while. Routing will allow us to pretend to have different paths, and it will show or hide components based on what path got passed in. And so what you would do is you would have, a path here.
Like a git, we would do all
Oops.
the gits and then the posts?
Well, the thing is so we've got all of our paths here, and we would actually tell it, okay, routes. We'll start here, actually. Need to do it this way. Stop. So this is the way it would work. The routes would come in and display selectively in here. If you're supposed to show up for that URL, then you do. If you don't, then you don't. But no matter what, you've got a header, and no matter what, you've got a footer. So this is jumping ahead, but this is the way you would do it. And so I can create all my components that will selectively show up here. And then I would have just one component for a header and one component for a footer. And that way it's there for every single page that I go to.
Okay.
So, yep. All right. So we'll get to that later, but it's one of those where you're kind of like, how does this work with this single page app stuff? It's okay. It all works. So here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off with just very simply, we're going to start with a header, kind of like we did. We'll just make this one an H3 though, because I don't like them that huge. We're going to call this one MERN, right? And then I'm going to create a div. And inside of that div, we'll just create a p tag. And we'll just call this one like step 1. All right. Pretty simple. Here, we've replaced it. We've got our MERN, our step 1. We can see this is still all in our app component, right? And so that's looking pretty good, but we probably want to add a little bit of style to this. And so, because what I'm going to start creating here is I need something that's going to look like it's got a title here, and then I have to have a whole bunch of little blocks underneath it. So the way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to use some of this reusability that's built into MERN. And we need kind of a CSS style for things. And so let's start with a const, and I'm going to call it heading style. I'm going to set that equal to an object, a JavaScript object, right? And we'll just make it a background color. Now notice that this is going to be key value pairs, and instead of using hyphens, I take away the hyphen and I camel case. This is the way that we differentiate. We're saying, hey, we're doing something in React. This isn't standard HTML inline CSS. And so I'm going to create this one as Dodger blue, because that is a favorite blue color of mine anyway. We'll make the color of the text white. And you'll notice that the value is always in double quotes. You can use single quotes technically, but it's just going to be, you just need them in quotes in order for this to work in React. So you can already see some different things going on. And in all actuality, this is not supposed to be in my return statement. That should be outside of the return statement. A return is going to be rendered. This element, this div and all of its children are going to get returned from when this function is called back to that index.js. And so with the heading style there, I can come in here and I can add in style equals, and then I use curly brackets. Curly brackets are a way of saying I'm going to do something with React. And I can use my heading style variable inside of curly brackets. And so what that's going to do for me now is that's going to allow me to see this solid blue with white text. Now, if we remember right, we were going to build something that looked like this. So that blue background and white text gives me a header. All right. So now let's go back into the code and look at what we need to do next. Okay. So underneath the header, I have to have some divs that are going to give me that red block style underneath it, right? Oh, go ahead.
Setting up this, I don't know if this is jumping ahead, but setting up this style, in this case, I get that you're basically putting the style elements in this way. Can we refer to it as we have in the past during Web Fundamentals, where we have like the index file and then we essentially are calling onto a style sheet, or in
Yes.
React? Okay.
You can use style sheets, absolutely. In fact, this index.css, or sorry, we import app.css.
Yeah, I was noticing that. Yeah.
And so this app.css, you'll notice, has got an app, an app logo, and it's even got
Those
media classes, right?
Yeah.
The media for being more dynamic depending on screen sizes. That one's pretty cool. But you'll notice in app.js, our div, our center div, is applying the class name app, which is right here. So it's just going to center our text. So this is, I'm showing you different styles of doing things, but yeah, you can absolutely use that .css file. And there's even another way of doing it in React that's really cool too.
So are those tachyons? I mean, well, is it common practice to use something called tachyons for React?
I'm not sure what you're referring to with tachyons.
Oh, okay. I guess we'll talk about it after. It's a CSS toolkit that's used to put into React components, I believe, and it changes things. But we'll go over that.
Okay. No, it's perfectly good.
Okay. And could I just finish my thought real quick with that setup? So if I'm going to be making my own custom CSS, could I just then I would basically just include that into that app.css folder as if I would normally, and I would just basically create my classes there and then reference them in divs. Excellent. Yeah. Okay, that was my question.
Absolutely. So, I mean, there's always different ways of doing things. The thing is single page applications are kind of handled differently because of you don't have a separate file for everything, right? And so being able to reference a style sheet in different components and not have them interfere with each other, there's a reason that there are entire libraries and packages that like tachyons that are out there, and it just depends on what you're looking to do. And so here, what I've done is I've just created a style for our paragraph that's going to give us a box. It's a red box with some margin around it, and it's going to give us this background color. So I'm hoping that that looks right. Okay, here we go. We've got our box. It's got some margin around it, 10 pixels. So we can see that we're still in our app component. So that's looking good. All right. And so separate divs within the app div. Josh, what do you mean by that? Did I totally miss something earlier and just not see it in the chat? Oh, okay. It was earlier. Never mind. Sorry about that. So now in our setup here, we've got one block. We needed to have, let's see here, 4 blocks, right? So, well, the easy way to get 4 blocks is to go in and duplicate lines, right? So if I do this, what do you guys think?
Or a for loop.
Yes, we could use a for loop. All right. All right, so now we've got these 4 steps and we look over at our page. What did I miss? Anyone got some suggestions for me?
Display inline block.
Oh, that's exactly it. Display inline block.
Inline block was my nemesis for a while, but I learned to use it properly.
Yeah.
Yes. I think everybody has had their run-ins with inline block, that's for sure. Okay, so now we've got ourselves set up. We've got the blue header. We've got the 4 blocks that are all together. And if we continue like this, we're going to see that this file is going to get huge really, really fast. So the way that we fix this is we actually create a folder here inside of source, and we call it components. This is the standard naming convention, and this is where almost all the building blocks will go. Now, as projects get bigger, there will be people that will say, well, you need a view folder and you need a components folder, and you kind of separate what they call separate concerns and make it so that these pieces, they're easier to find, they're easier to use by putting them into an organized way. So inside of this components folder, I create the individual building blocks that I want, right? I could create a header, a footer, a hooder, I don't know. It's kind of the same. Anyway, and then you can create all the different blocks that'll get repeated in there. And so what I want to do is let's create a file, and file names are always capitalized, just like our app.js. We'll call this one, let's call this one, we'll call it track.js because it's going to include the full track, the full JavaScript, MERN stack, or whatever track you're working on, right? Every one of these files is going to start out relatively the same. Every component has to start by importing React from React. What that's saying is we need to get the React library to give us the namespace React. This is kind of like bigger than just a class. This is an entire library that we're saying, hey, I want to have access to it. All right. And it also enables that React code that we're going to be writing. Next, we need to create a class. We just got done with classes and our object-oriented stuff, and I'm going to name this class the exact same thing as the file that I've got created. You guys are familiar with extends because we want to take advantage of something that's in React to create our class. We want to inherit all of their hard work for free. And it's going to extend react.component. Okay, react.component is a parent class that has all the functionality I could ever want in it. Now, the one thing that is a common, and it's kind of a better practice, instead of doing react.this, react.that, you import it separately so it has a separate file name or a separate variable name. And the way that we do that is we come here and we use curly brackets. We're destructuring using the curly brackets. And I want to take the component out of the React library, and now I no longer have to refer to it as react.component. I just have to use component. All right, so this is looking good so far, and now I've got my component in there. The one thing that every class has to have, no matter what, it has to have one method implemented, render. And that render is going to take in no parameters, and it's going to return. Now here's the odd part, parentheses. Return is going to use these parentheses to group around all of the HTML and JSX that I'm writing. And return can only return one single element, just like in our app.js. We had to have a div to hold everything inside of it, and then I could put as much as I wanted in there. The same thing here. I've created a component. I can only return one thing. And so the easiest thing to start with is, of course, a div. And this is my message inside of my div. Just to try it out, right? Now, the thing is I need a way to pass this information back and forth between my app, because my app is the one that's plugged into everything. And so my app needs to know about my component so that it can use my component. And the way that I do that is a series of export and import. I'm going to do the same thing that React did. And the way that we do this is we start with export default, meaning, hey, this is when you import from this file, this is the thing you're going to get. Because technically I could export a whole bunch of things inside of one file, and people would have to name it specifically, just like our destructuring of JavaScript and pulling out the keys that we wanted as we destructured from an object. We have to do the same thing if we export multiple things. If we don't export multiple things, I can send a default, and nobody needs to know exactly how I did it in the other file. So export default track. So now if somebody imports my track component, they're going to get this class. And by default, it's going to render these things when it's instantiated. So over here in my app, I can say, let's see, import, and I'm going to call it track to match. It doesn't have to be, but I'm going to call it track, and I'm going to say it comes from my component folder, and it's my track module. I don't select the one that says .js. I only go with the name of it. Now that I have that, I can come down into my HTML here, and I can start using it. And so let's go ahead and give it track. And then it's a self-closing tag. So track is going to get inserted right here above my H3 style, because we read things from top to bottom. And here it is. Hello, from my track component. And you can see here, if I look at my app, it includes everything, because track is inside of my app component. But the track component itself is only this top part right here. All right. So I can put my track wherever I want it, and it'll just show up wherever I want it. So I could, in fact, I could use multiples. Let's go ahead and have one at the top and the bottom. There's my hello, and there's my hello. So now I'm starting to segment things off, but let's take full advantage of this. I'm going to come down here, and I'm going to take this guy out, take this guy out, and then I'm going to take all of this, my headers, my return. I'm going to go over to my brand new component, right? And this brand new component now is going to have the ability to run everything. Now, I've got to get rid of this extra return statement down here because I can only return one time, right? But now I have got all of my code here that it was exactly the same as what I used in the other one. And now with that in place, I can come here and I can get rid of all this stuff, except for my initial div, because I need that one. And here I'm going to call my track component. And we will have it show up just like normal. But the difference is I've got my track here, and I'm going to need to refresh. Sometimes things don't show up right in this dev tool, and all I do is control refresh the page, and it'll get rid of the extras, the little shadows, okay? So now I can see my track, and it's looking good. And so let's see where we can go from here, right? So with that in place, I could say that now I kind of need my profile section, the one that has my name in it. And so let's just say that we need a new component, because that's a new block that we were looking at. And here I can say, what do we want to call this one? Progress.js. Make sure I'm spelling it right. And in here, I'm just going to, for the purposes of brevity, I am going to copy and paste this. Okay, so now, oh, come on. My computer's running really, really slow, and so I'm just kind of concerned on how this is gonna, how this will turn out. So, all right. So just like before, I use my import statement to pull in React and the component class, so that my class right here, which is going to be called progress, is going to extend the component class. And I'm going to be able to export it. Now here I created a box styling that's going to make my little progress box look good. And all I have to do is return what I want. I have a single div that I applied styling to, and it's got an H3 header in it. Nothing fancy. We did exactly what we did with the other one, the tracks. The difference is this one's going to display in a different place. In order to use it though, I have to import it. It doesn't just automatically show up. And so my import of progress from the components folder, and I go to progress without the .js, and then I can come here and I can do progress. So now I have these two different components, both loaded up inside of my app, and they're ready to be displaying things. Okay, well, we're getting closer, right? I've got my two components that I can see here in my components section of my dev tools. I can see my track is in one place, my progress is in the other. So we're getting there, right? Now, if I remember right, I needed to add in some inline block to things before in order to make this work. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new div. This div will hold all of my tracks because I need a column for my progress and a column for all of the tracks that go up and down. And so in this div, of course, I'm going to need some style. Now, rather than going and creating a const style, I'm just going to go style that's an inline style here. And I need curly brackets to show that I'm dealing with React JavaScript. And I need to pass in an object. We just sent in the little const variable, the object that we had created separately. Here we can do it manually. Creating this guy right here, I can put in display and in quotes, inline block. All right. And then I move my track up into that, my track component, and let's just see how that looks. Let's see if I got that one. Okay, so we're getting closer, right? We've got our inline block. Things are starting to match up a little bit. And the beauty of React is we can reuse components. So let's just add in a bunch of these. There we go. Starting to look good. Okay, now I'm going to really quickly touch on one more thing, and that is properties. Okay, props are going to be needed for passing information back and forth, because just like in our classes, if I created 16 of the same class and never changed anything, it's like, well, why do I need 16 copies of that? We want to be able to make them each unique. And the way we do that is with properties. Now, properties are something that are built in. Regardless of how we use components, it's just a part of components. And so the way we do it is we use kind of similar to HTML attributes. So if I said track name equals, then I need to create an object. This object is a JavaScript object. There are certain cases where it's not required, but just trust me, rather than working with the exceptions to the rule, just make it an object, and regardless of what you pass in, a string, a number, an object, a function, whatever the case may be, putting it in curly brackets will save you headache. Okay, so let's just go ahead and we'll say web fundamentals, and then I'm going to, whoops, attributes don't use commas. Anyway, then we could say that we have a module name. The hesitation in my keyboard is just killing me. A module name of fun. We'll just make it simple, because I want to pass in two pieces of information so that you guys get a better view of it. And I'm just going to create a few of these, and we'll call this one MERN, and oops, we'll call this one super fun, because we all know MERN is the best. And then this one will be Java, if I can spell it. And you know what? I totally missed my curlies on this. That's a bad thing to do. Like I said, there are certain things, there are certain exceptions to the rule, and strings happen to be one of them. So that's why it wasn't complaining to me. And we'll say this one is Python. Python. Okay. So now I'm going to get rid of these extra ones, because just like anytime I call something with arguments that's a function, I need to receive it on the other end. And so in my component, I need to come here and say, hey, I'm going to receive those specific values. Now there's different ways of doing it. By default, since I'm in a class, I can refer to this as this.props. It's going to be an object that contains all the pieces that I passed in. There's different ways of doing this, but I'm going to just show you here two ways. All right. The first is by destructuring. And so I do a const, and I will say this is destructured from the object. And I called this, it was module name, I think. No, we wanted track name for this one. No, it was module. Sorry, I'm trying to make it as easy as I can on myself. So module name. And I'm destructuring that from the props object. So here I can go in and say that my, get myself straight. So that's why. I'm like, that's not looking right. I need it here in my render. So there we go. There's my const module name. Module name is coming from this. It's the key that I used to pass in. Module name's the key. This object is the value. Track name is a key. This is a value. So I can destructure it, or I can use it right here using curly brackets.
Hey Kevin, one quick question. What is props?
So props is shortened for properties. So inside of any React component, you have an object that's passed between each component, whether you use it or not. The object could be empty, or it could have things in it, and you don't even have to use everything that gets passed in, but it's an object called props. And that props is going to allow you to pass information back and forth to make these unique. So, and we need props.trackName here. So this is directly accessing it. And here I use the destructured version. Once again, I still have to use my curly brackets to indicate that I'm using JavaScript, the React JSX, but I can just reference the variable here. So either way that I do it, I have the ability to grab this thing that was passed through props into my component. And if I do that, then here I can see that I was able to change the values just by passing them in. I'm reusing that code over and over with just slight changes. And that props, it's going to give me the ability to customize each copy of this component. There's lots of ways to do it, but this is our first step. And for the assignment Prop It Up, you're going to have to be able to pass in keys and values into your components that you've created, and then use them either by destructuring them or referencing them directly. There is no right or wrong. You can do it either way. And so just remember, anytime inside of this HTML type stuff, you use these curly brackets to say, hey, I'm going to use some JavaScript React syntax. So I can do logic there. I can refer to variables. I can insert entire objects for styling, whatever I'd like to do. So, any questions?
Yeah, so here, what are we doing in index.js? Are we running the app in index.js?
Index.js it's not anything that we're going to really play with. It does the job of filling in the DOM with the stuff that we pass in from our app.js. So when I come in, I'm going to go straight to app.js and I'm going to start building from here.
So, but the file which is running by doing a npm start, right? Is index.js file which is running, right?
That's correct. It's kicked off with our index.js. Yeah.
And we are defining all our components in the folder which we created is components, right?
That is correct.
We are creating all those components and then we are basically importing them in our app.js.
Yes, that's correct.
And app.js is kicked in by index.js.
That's correct.
Got it. So I ran that command which you said that npm react create first app. And when I open the dev tools, I am not able to see components in there. When you are able to see, wanted to
He
see.
made that folder.
Well, here's the thing. Did you add in the extension in Chrome?
No.
So what we need to do is in my extensions, I have got an extension called React Developer Tools. And that's what gave me that that components section. So yeah, all you have to do is go into they've got great extensions for React Developer Tools, both Firefox and Chrome. So if you were to go and grab either Firefox or Chrome and add that specific extension, that'll give you this little thing. And you can see here, React Developer Tools isn't lit up now for me.
Got it.
Because this page is not written with React.
Got it. Thanks.
Any other questions? So is there a way to import all of the files from components without calling individual files? No. It would be nice, but the thing is that would actually be a bad practice in the long run. It would be nice for us as kind of like a shortcut when we're developing these small assignments, but in a larger project, you wouldn't want to import all your things into one file. You would actually break it out and structure it just a little bit different. Great question though. Any other questions?
Could you just go through one component code just by, when somebody sees a code, how they read it?
Okay, so are you thinking like go into my progress?
Any progress or track, anything should be fine, yeah.
Okay, so every component that you build has to start by importing all the code that's going to support a component. Now we'll add more things over the course of what we're doing, but in order to make this particular type of component, which is called a class component, to work, we're going to import the React library as well as a specific class called component from the React package, the React library that we're using. We'll create a class, name it what we would like, but typically the name of the class matches the name of the file. And we're going to extend the parent class. We're going to inherit from the component React class. We're going to inherit everything that it has. And that has a whole bunch of functionality in methods and properties that'll help us ease our job. Then you have a render method. The render method is going to run on every single class. Every time I reference this class inside of my app.js or any other place, every time I reference it, it's going to run this render method. And that means that consists of reading these things and returning a specific set of HTML or JSX. It's React HTML in a sense. Return can only ever return a single element. So you always start with something like a div. There are other things that you could use if you wanted to just return an H3 header. You could do that. Or you could use a header element that's our encasing and closing and having everything inside of it. As long as it's only a single element that we're returning, we can have as much in the middle of it as we want. Then we have to export that specific class so that anybody that imports it can access it.
Got it.
And so that's where you come into another component and you would use this import from, and then you reference the specific file that comes from.
Got it.
All right.
Got it. And then where we define those props where we can use it is in the components.
Yeah, so the props, what you're going to do is you're going to pass those in when you actually utilize that component. And then the component itself has to receive and use those props. So there's two different ways to do that. You can destructure from the props object, giving it the same name as what it was called when it got passed in. You can destructure it right there. And now I have a local variable called module name that came passed in, or I can reference it directly as this props object dot the key name, and I can get the value of it from that way too.
So the question here is this props, is it coming from the components file or from the app file?
So
Defining this.
that's a great question. What happens is in the React library, anytime we reference, we utilize a component, it automatically creates an object. And that object is referred to as props. Now the trick is there's two different ways to do components. We're teaching you class components first. Okay. But there's also a thing called functional components. No matter what, as long as it's a component, it gets, React creates for us this props object no matter what. So they just get referenced a little different. This dot's props because it's a class, or props inside of functional components. They're the same thing. It's an object that's automatically created as soon as I invoke and use a component. Does that make sense? Did that solve it?
It's like so it is basically the props is whenever any, so I'm trying to just repeat what you said so that I understand. Whenever you create any object of component class, right? Like for example, we have track. whenever I create an object in the app.js file, at that time, this function gets created, which is called props.
Mhm.
Is that right? Oh, sorry, an object, not function, but an object
Yeah.
which is called props.
So yes, every time you come into a component, its props is going to be an object, regardless of whether it's functional or class. And it's an object that has keys and values.
For,
And so, mhm.
for that component. Is that right?
Yep, exactly. And it's specifically passed to this component using this app.js right here.
Got
We
it.
can, and so,
Property of a component.
I'm sorry, you broke up. What was that?
So basically it is like a properties of a component. I have a component, but then I have some properties for that component, which I can access using props.
That's exactly it. I kind of like to think of them as parameters. Like if I was talking about a constructor, I could pass in these values and they'd get used. Well, this is just kind of like a modified version of that, where they stuffed it into a object and sent it in instead of being everything individual. So
Got it.
yeah.
I got it.
Mhm.
So we are basically creating the objects of components class in the app file, and hence
Mhm.
what's getting instantiated. Got it. Thanks.
Yep. Awesome. Any other questions? All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.